Recording.
Hey guys, and welcome to this episode of the Cardinals Nation 24/7 podcast. I'm your host, Chris Lawless, and joining me, as always, is my good friend and fellow co host, Larry, the living legend Cox. How you doing tonight, Larry?
All right, Chris. So we know, buddy.
I know right now it's kind of a boring time when we should be all excited about baseball with there being a lockout, but we can get into that here in a minute. Joining us tonight, we do have a special guest with us. You can find him over on Twitter. He's got quite the cult following over there, and he goes by Cardinals Live. So how you doing tonight, Live?
Oh, pretty good. I want to thank you guys for having me.
Welcome, man.
Yep, welcome. I've followed you for a few years over there, and I know how Twitter's a totally different beast than some of the other social media platforms. But I just wanted to give you kind of a minute to introduce yourself to the audience of where they can find you and what you bring to the table as far as Twitter's concerned and the whole Cardinals Live persona.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Cardinals_live. We've been kind of doing some off-season scoops for about 3.5, 4 years now. I'm lucky enough to have a close relationship with somebody that it has close connections in the Cardinals front office. And because of those connections, partly for fun and all that jazz, Cardinals Live became a thing. And some tidbits over the years I've been able to throw out there, and they've come to fruition. And because of that, there's been a lot of people that have hopped on the bandwagon, which I always use the hashtag team_live. For the people that have really been following me for the past 3.5, 4 years. Um, and, I'm a fan first. I am someone who gets excited like the rest of us when it comes to off-season news. I just so happen to hear that off-season news from a direct person. And about 4 years ago, I chose to share some of that information on my Twitter platform. And I just do it for fun because I know there's some people out there that live, breathe, and eat Cardinals baseball or Major League Baseball like I do.
For sure. And like I said, I've followed for quite a while now. And yeah, with Twitter, I don't have quite the following or interact much on there like I do other places. But, Twitter can be toxic at times and it can be fun. I think it's all about, how people go about using it. When you put out a tweet where you've got some information, I can tell, by the people chiming in. Some of them they're eating everything that you're selling, because they're wanting more and more and more. Every 5 minutes you'll get a message of, hey, what's the latest? And on the flip side of that, you have some naysayers that kind of go a different route. Where it's like, oh, he's just blowing smoke. Anybody that's buying into the hype is. Anybody that doesn't have a check mark next to their name basically is irrelevant. So how do you balance between the two? I know Twitter's a fun thing. When you do have source telling you things and you do want to share it with others, how do you balance the good and bad from, taking the feedback from fellow Cardinal fans?
It just depends on the toxicity of it. If it's all in fun, I'll chime back. I'll have fun with it. Because I don't try to be anything I'm not on Twitter. I tell people all the time, I don't care if my account is this prestigious account. I'll snap back here and there. If it's really too toxic and I think it's beyond the scope of having fun, I do have a tendency to block people simply because I'm not doing this for anyone except the people that want to play part in it and follow and support. If you don't want to, you don't have to hit the follow button. I don't beg for followers. I never have. I don't put a lot of my personal information on there because I'm not searching to be this famous Cardinals person. I mean, I frequently make it to where I have to approve my followers. When it comes down to the naysayers, luckily, this isn't my first or second year doing this. I have a track record and a way to stand behind, and I'll frequently retweet those and throw them up on the Twitter sphere, just because every year this is the issue. I have what I would call your day ones, the people that were around for the first and second call, and then the next year I have people that were around for the second and third call. But because of that growth and the more followers that I do end up getting, my things are retweeted, which catches the attention of newer people. And that's how all social media grows. But because of that, my web becomes bigger, and then people who don't even know about me, it's like a restart. I have to deal with the same stuff every off season of people being ignorant or the naysayers, asking me who my source is, saying my reputation's on the line with every single thing I put out. And it's like, buddy, I already have a reputation. Yeah, I mean, and I've been able to be first and put out some pretty big calls. So that's where I would put my reputation on. But I don't get too phased by it. A lot of it's just fun. But if you cross the line, there's no point for me letting you follow me anymore, and I just keep it at that.
Yeah, I mean we deal with that too. Larry doesn't frequent Twitter, hardly at all. But I'll let him kind of ask you a few questions as somebody that isn't as familiar with you on things that you might have heard, or anything heading into this lockout. I'll let Larry kind of ask you a few things.
Yeah, like Chris said, I'm not really a big presence on Twitter. The toxic side of it is probably my side where I've seen more. So I just find it harder to find reliable sources, I guess you could say. But if your sources are reliable, is what they are. Again, it always comes down to the final decision from the team itself. And you only get information from them, so that's the best you can do. So sometimes you're gonna be right, sometimes you're gonna be wrong. I get that. But as far as the big news, I mean, is there anything that you've heard lately prior to this lockout or coming out of the lockout that is noteworthy or of substance?
Yeah, if anybody was following me, they would know that I pinpointed the Cardinals had key interest in the Marcus Stroman market to a standpoint of, based on my knowledge, there was years in AAV discussed. And then it seems like that market didn't go anywhere, and they were also having interest in the story market. And then those are where the discussions kind of headed into, as if the Cardinals and the Stroman market never really materialized to the point where the discussions got serious. And the kind of the primary focus was then put towards the Stroman or story market, excuse me. And I believe, based on the few of the Cardinals' non-movements, it's a telling sign. And it solidifies in my head the knowledge that I was given, simply because you looked at comments made, that offers were made. You looked at the kind of how the market was developing, and you really had a sense that there was a certain tier level of players that were being sought after and signing. We weren't talking really about mid-level relievers being offered contracts yet. We weren't talking, bench bats weren't being sought after. It was the marquee names that the teams were trying to get solidified before the lockout commenced. And then we had confirmation that the Cardinals had a couple offers on the table, that was publicly. So based on my knowledge, the Cardinals were a little bit more involved in Stroman talks than I believe is out there publicly.
Yeah, I mean, I think for the most part, I think fans don't realize, that you kick the tires, you make an offer, and it's still up to the player and the agent to make that decision. And a lot of times we don't even know those offers were even made, because they may have been trumped by somebody else, say like a Stroman to the Cubs. He may have offered him another year or what have you that Mo didn't offer. So moving forward, I mean, is there any talk of how long this work stoppage is going to last, or any of that kind of nature from your source?
So no length on the lockout of the source. I did do a space last night on Twitter, where I did get several telling updates, little tidbits. One I'll share, and I shared this in the space, but for you, there are whispers around the league that the owners have considered temporarily lifting the lockout to perform what you would call a makeshift winter meeting. It could be literally a time span of 2 to 3 days. which is unprecedented. A lockout has never been temporarily lifted in a major sports league in the United States, just to simply conduct transactions. And there's two kind of reasons why I'm hearing it's being discussed. I was told one in particular that one kind of want to create a venue for the league and the union for more face-to-face conversations. At the same time, do it in a way where it's publicly going to take the perception off the lockout, and by doing so, dominating the mainstream news, sports news, but in a good light, which is signings, transactions, business taking place. I think everyone can speak for themselves when the excitement that we were having over that 72-hour window of we were getting bam, 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 bam transactions. It dominated the news cycle, and it almost made you forget that we were going into a lockout. And I think Major League Baseball took notice, and I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I found it very intriguing that there was consideration of temporarily lifting the lockout, having a 2 to 3 3 days of winter meetings, and then commencing the lockout again. And another tidbit off that, another kind of backbone to do that is my source kind of told me that inside the organization, there's kind of concern league wide of conversations happening with players, agencies, and teams, and we're supposed to have no communication, and it seems like there's a possibility that that's not happening. There's under the table talks and negotiations happening, kind of laying the groundwork for when the gates open, and that's completely illegal during a lockout. So you have a lot of owners who are hesitant to kind of be on the outside looking in. They're wanting to follow the rules, and you have teams that are not, and you have players agencies trying to get the best deal for their player. They don't care about the lockout. They're not associated with the lockout. They represent a player, and they're going to take the phone call. So you have a lot of ownerships and teams pushing to open the windows a little bit and let some of the spray in. I would be interested if it happens. As a fan, I love the idea.
Yeah, I listened, to a little bit of your live last night, and you kind of touched on the fact that the Cardinals could, I don't know how to word it. They're always kind of play by the rules type of mentality, and if other teams are doing the under the table kind of negotiating and the Cardinals are not, this kind of might set them back or knock them out of the running for some of these players. And that's not to say that I think the ownership needs to break the rules and, be having some discussions. But, what are your thoughts on, do you think Mozeliak and company are following all the rules, or do you think that, they're really going to hamper themselves if they do obey the rules when other GMs and owners could be having these conversations?
Well, so it's my belief that they're following the rules, at least with their own 40-man. They've sent a lot of notifications out. I have a guy that joins the space that is very close to the Springfield facility. They're close with the Gorman family, and he has relationships with some of these players. And he essentially said that he was told that the Cardinals kind of let them know where things stood, finalized some off-season workout programs, and that was it. And they said, we'll talk soon. So if they're following the rules with their own guys, where less likely that it would come out that they're breaking the rules, I would imagine that they might be kosher as far as the rest of the free agency and trade market goes, compared to other teams that may not be as kosher.
Well, not to just beat on the dead horse that's the lockout, but Larry touched on it too with some of these players that you had tweeted about the Cardinals having an interest in and having actual conversations or deals placed with. How shocked were you? If you hear that Mozeliak addresses the the media and says that Paul DeYoung, they've still got faith in him, and then they're going and being in the runnings for a Trevor Story. I mean, I know for us personally, we've talked on the podcast before that you can never say never on the potential of an upgrade. And sometimes we think, well, is Story that much of an upgrade over DeYoung? I mean, when you put their stat numbers together and the salary, I know both of that goes into consideration for ownership, but just whether it's from the fan perspective or from you having a source, how shocked were you when you heard the names Marcus Stroman and Trevor Story?
I was more shocked when I found out that the Cardinals were even opened up discussions with Marcus Stroman. Simply because I was the first one to be kind of on the aggressiveness of the Cardinals. I very quickly put it out of their aggressive nature. They were literally checking in with you. They checked in with Scherzer. They checked in with Stroman. I also put out that they checked in with Zach Greinke. And then I also put out Matz. Now, Matz was the less likely that I thought, simply because of the aggression that I seen on what I would call the top tier guys. After the dust has settled, it makes perfect sense. They started from the top and got kind of what that market was going to look like. They educated themselves, and then they came in heavy on the Matz market. It was very strategic, and that's the kind of thing John Mozeliak is known for. He strikes. He doesn't negotiate against himself. So he got a price set in his head by using higher talent. So Stroman was a surprise when I first started getting the scoops. Story was not, simply because I think that there's a fanfare for the Cardinals upgrading for a shortstop. So I just think even checking in is just doing his due diligence. So I kind of expected that. I would have been shocked if they got in the Seager market or the Correa market. That would have dropped my jaw. But the Story market was almost, for me, I kind of expected them to. So it wasn't really a surprise.
Yeah, I expected some of that, because of having a down year and his market value, as you mentioned several times on your lives, not being what the other shortstops are. So especially when you might be able to swoop in and get him on the cheap, totally makes sense for the Cardinals to go that route. I know Larry and I'll let Larry kind of take over from here, but with like Steven Matz being signed, how do you see going after another starting pitcher when currently you've got Hudson coming back as your 4 and you've still got Michaelis as your 5, and to hear that they were in the running on a Marcus Stroman and the potential of maybe somebody else now that we missed out on Stroman, do you see the Cardinals, I'll ask Larry this, do you see the Cardinals really making a push for another starting pitcher? Especially given that Alex Reyes and others have been mentioned as candidates, him and Jake Woodford. Do you think they go heavy for a starter when the lockout ends?
I don't think they do, Chris. I think it was either Stroman or Matz. I think it was one or the other. I don't think they were going to get both. I think that I think you got the young guys coming, and I don't think you want to block any of those guys, the Woodfords, the Liberators, the Zach Thomases, those guys. You don't want to block any of those guys either. And I think right now, I think the conversations with Flaherty, is Flaherty going to sign that long-term deal, or is he, looking just to do his arbitration years and move on? And I think that's the biggest thing. But even like Michaelis, maybe a team like, the Rangers or somebody that is desperate for pitching, that's a possible landing spot where you can make a trade. It kind of happens this time of year, especially coming out of a lockout, where maybe, like you said, that there are teams not playing by the rules. Maybe one of those guys that are playing by the rules misses out on a starting pitcher. And, we have a few of those guys sitting around. So I would say we're not in the market for another starting pitcher, but what does our guest have to say about it? He has more of the insight than I do, I guess.
Right. What say you, Live? It was kind of crazy, even after Matz, to be linked to Stroman. And again, you touched on, Greinke being a possibility. In my opinion, I know bullpen pieces, I think, are a dime a dozen. I think that you could even go out and get a John Lester or Jay Happ if need be, to fill a bullpen spot, if all the other top level relievers, get picked up. But what say you on the starting gig? If we landed another one, does that push Hudson to the bullpen, or, are we kind of thinking Michaelis might have another injury setback, and what are your thoughts on that?
So, it's hard to tell you what they're doing currently. We'll kind of see what the information comes in post lockout. But from my opinion, I almost will say that getting another starting pitcher is necessary. You having the one thing I like about Steven Matz, I don't care about the career year he had. I don't even care that he's a ground ball pitcher and he fits our defensive scheme perfectly. I care about he's averaged over 150 innings minus 2020 in the shortened season. That's where my primary focus is. That's where the Cardinals lacked in 2021, and it's innings. And you have Jack Flaherty coming back off of injury. You have Hudson coming back off of injury. You have Michaelis coming back off of injury. I think Hudson's going to have an innings limit. I would almost rather see him start the year in the pen. I don't have a lot of trust in Woodford. I don't think Liberatore is going to be ready coming out of spring training. And after so many questions that we had in 2021 with starting pitching, to the fact that we had to go out and acquire innings in Lester and Happ, I don't want to enter 2022 with any question marks about do we have enough innings in our starting rotation. We don't have the team. I don't know how Marmol is going to handle it, but we don't have the type of starting pitchers that you would normally see having an opener, kind of a dual role. A lot of our pitchers are workhorses, and we're built around innings and getting to a certain point in our bullpen the way that it's set up. Now, we all know Mike Schultz's philosophy. I don't know how Marmol is going to handle his rotation or bullpen, but what I can tell you is having innings never hurts. And with you have all these question marks of these pitchers coming off of injury, not playing for over a year with Hudson. Michaelis barely played last year. Flaherty had his set, but we all know all the injuries. I don't want to go into 2021 with question marks if these guys are healthy. Are they going to be able to eat innings for a full season? When you can go with, I'm not saying we need a frontline starter. I'm not saying that we needed a Marcus Stroman or a Scherzer on top of signing Matz. But one name I've thrown out quite a bit is like a pitcher like Zach Greinke. He's a vet. I think he's gonna come fairly cheap. He might even be the type of pitcher that's gonna sign a 1-year deal, depending on how his market develops. Now, a lot of people disagree that he would sign with the St. Louis Cardinals because he's once had us on his no trade list. But he was a different pitcher then. He was well sought after. He was able to pick his destinations. He's not the same guy anymore. But what he is, he's an innings eater. And if you could slot him in the 3 or 4 hole, kind of either behind Matz or in front of Matz, I think you lengthen your starting rotation. You don't have to worry about rushing Liberatore. You don't have to worry about putting Woodford in the rotation, barring an injury. And you can move Hudson into the bullpen and let him take his time coming back. And if an injury happens, which it always will, then Hudson can get a few starts here and there and work him back in. But to say he's ready to pitch 150 to 200 innings next year, I think it could be a stretch saying he could.
Yeah, I can agree with that. And, we're also putting a lot invested in, Adam Wainwright returning to form, and not saying that he's not, but when that's your lead dog, and at his age, having to rely on him to be the one that carries the rotation, it would be nice to have, if not a feared rotation, one with a little more, comfort level going in, because, prior to last season, we were all on board on this podcast being like, we've got a plethora of young arms that, we've got more arms than spots basically, but we didn't foresee the injuries happen and the fact that none of our pitchers could throw the ball over home plate. It seemed like it was atrocious at times. So, the Cardinals had to make kind of I'm not going to say a panic move, but when they did bring in LeBlanc and Happ and Lester, it was to solidify some of the issues they had with these young guys. And I do think guys like a Woodford and Oviedo and others, I think they're going to have bright futures. But if you're going to give Marmol all the weapons this year and you really want to make a true run at a championship, it's better to not have as many question marks as, exclamation points. And somebody like a Stroman or a Greinke would be an exclamation point. What say you on that, Larry?
The thing I didn't really think about it, and I just was reading up while you guys were having the conversation. Zach Greinke actually played with Skip Schumacher, and Skip actually is a real big fan of his, and they're buddies. So that is another kind of a telltale that maybe he is pursuing it. Hey, let's bring him over here. Who knows? Um, like I said again, I think we have young pitching. I hate to see him blocked. If one of those guys like a Greinke or somebody like that came over for a year deal, I could see that happening. Yes, but I don't see those guys signing long term, more than 1 or 2 years. I just don't see it happening. I think we got a lot of youngsters. Um, to say that I wouldn't like, more veteran presence, I'd agree, but those veteran presence, they bring question marks as well. I mean, injuries do happen to those older players, so there's nobody you're going to put on that mound. You're going to say, yeah, he's, over the course of seasons, he's pitched 200 innings. Great. That means he's used up. He's pitched a lot of innings. We've seen those guys that have been workhorses in the past go down. I'm not relying on Carpenter, or excuse me, Wainwright to pitch like he did last year. I mean, he's a year older and he's got all the innings under his belt from last year, but it's still saying that give up on those young guys. I don't see that Mozeliak doing that. I just don't. I know you're the nostalgia in you keep wanting to say they're going to go all in before Yachty and Wayno, and I just don't see it. I mean, they have a budget and they're going to stick to it. They're not going to blow the budget just so Wayno can have a good farewell tour. It's just not going to happen. I mean, I'd love for it to happen. I'd love for us to go out and get them all. Let's go out and get all the big names. But we know the truthful, the ownership. And if we get Story, I would be really shocked that we're not going stand put with the two shortstops we have now. I'd like to see a Story, but again, what Story do you get? Do you get the guy that doesn't hit away from, Coors Field or Colorado, or do you get the guy that slumped all year last year and will struggle again this year? I don't know. Being friends with Arenado, I think that's another in for him as well. So maybe there is a positive. I don't know. Like I said, I think right now it's all of our opinions. I don't have any sources in the organization like Live does, and I listen to all sides. Like I said before, I'm not naysaying anybody.
So just to kind of piggyback off of a few of your comments that I agree with, I will say that the Cardinals front office isn't going to look at this season like it's any other season. They're going to stick with the program. They're going to stick with their timeline, and they take baby steps of production. And they're not going to go all out just because it's Wayno and Yachty's possible last year. They're not looking at it through that lens, the same lens the fans are looking through it. The best case for the Cardinals, the only lens that they're looking through, and I hate to say that, but their crowds might be a little bit bigger. But they're not going to go shell out a ton of money just to say they're going to try to make sure they win it all. But I do want to touch base with some of your comments about blocking young pitchers. And I don't think that we should block young pitchers, but you also have to, when you kind of look at the scope of it, what young pitchers are ready. I would argue that Oviedo has shown that he probably needs a productive, successful minor league season under his belt to regain some of his confidence. I would argue that Woodford took some steps towards the end of the year, but nothing more than maybe what I would be more comfortable as a bullpen piece. I don't believe Liberatore is going to be ready to start the season, and because of service time in general, even if he was ready, I don't see him probably in the big league club around the All-Star break. So you're talking about a half of a season where you're looking for innings. And I'm sure I'm missing a few younger names, but none that I believe that are knocking on the door so hard that it would prevent the Cardinals from signing a 1-year deal with a starting pitcher. Now, multi-year deal, I agree with you. I think that's completely unnecessary, and that's when you're starting the block. But I don't think for 2021 there's a bunch of youngsters that are ready to go. Could we push them? Probably, but what we've learned, like with Oviedo, is maybe sometimes pushing them isn't what they need.
And on the flip side of things too, like I know pitching is kind of an issue, and especially like I said, the bullpen is probably something that they're going to address coming out of the lockout. Although I do think there's a number of guys out there that could help this team. I mean, last year I know when we got Garcia, when we got McFarland, all over social media was here goes Mo dumpster diving, and then at the end of the year, because both of them pitched great, our fans are like, absolutely, how did we let Garcia signed with the Padres? And it's like, you guys didn't even want him when he came here. So I think there's plenty of options out there that could come in and, rejuvenate their careers, at least kind of solidify the bullpen. But pitching aside, and I've written a few blog articles about this. I know the DH is all but a certainty for the National League. And the Cardinals have mentioned interest in, getting a bench bat or a lefty bat. Not sure if they're going to use that DH role to rest everyday players that they currently have. But knowing, some of the names that you had mentioned, like a Jock Peterson or a Travis Shaw that you had talked about in some of your lives, I wrote a piece about Kyle Seager that Larry was kind of high on, talking about free agency, and albeit he'll probably get some decent offers, he could be had on maybe a 2-year deal for 12 to 14 million. And that's somebody that could maybe slide into that DH role. He's a lefty bat coming off of a down year average wise, but hitting 35 homers with 100 RBI. I'm sure he'd probably rather take a third base gig somewhere, but could you see a player like that being, where the Cardinals might use some of their money and address the offense? Because there was a lot of games last season where the Cardinals just couldn't score. And I know that we had some of our key pieces out at times, but I think, putting the pressure on the pitchers to pitch a 2-0 game, I think would help to get more offense. What say you on the offensive side of things?
Yeah, I'm a big Kyle Seager fan, as far as coming over on a maybe 1 to 2 year deal. My fear is that the Cardinals are going to use the DH position as almost a developmental position. You put the young guys in there, give them at bats, use it as a position for the first couple of years until they figure out that they need to actually utilize it. They're gonna use it as a way to kind of screen their young guys, and that's kind of like my fear I have uh, when it comes to. Uh, See, my opinion is if we're not if we're not going to chase after Story and we're going to let that go, I think that you have to find some avenue to lengthen your lineup, and I would prefer it with a left-handed bat. With Story, my problem is I want to know where Story's market's going to end up, because if it's not. He's coming off an injury. He's coming off a horrid season. There's people that are really concerned with his road splits because he has the course field persona. You have everything going against his market value. You're not going to possibly find a better value as far as where a player's market value is compared to his true market value. Uh, Unless teams really get desperate and they start going deeper into his market, where I believe his market stands right now, um, there's not going to be a huge comparison in price compared to what you would call a Kyle Seager, simply based on, I believe, AAV. Now the years might be different, but right now, for me personally, I put the two kind of on the same pedestal, and I know that's going to shock a bunch of people, but we're not talking about a Story coming off a typical Story year. Or his injury and all the things I mentioned. There's a lot of things going against Story where I believe he might be best suited to take a 1 year deal at a little higher AAV and reset his market, and then try to get a multi-year deal around the same AAV he's going to sign the 1 year deal for. But I don't believe he's going to get a super high AAV in a multi-year deal. Um, so you can kind of look on that plethora. I kind of put a poll out earlier. Um, I don't necessarily have any information on this, but I believe the Oakland Athletics and the St. Louis Cardinals match up and align very well for a possible trade. They have all the pieces that would interest them, and the Oakland Athletics has quite a few pieces that could benefit the Cardinals. And to be truthful, we're clamoring for a shortstop when we have Mason Wynn, you have Delvin Perez, You can have Tommy Edman who can slide over to short. You're going to have to figure out where you're going to put Jordan Walker if Arenado doesn't opt out. You're going to have to figure out what position he plays. You have a plethora of top 30 prospects that can fill in those positions that we're talking about. And then the same people that are clamoring for Trevor Story are the same people telling me that Mason Wynn and Jordan Walker, they're untouchable. Well, if they're untouchable, then what are we doing? We're essentially begging for them to logjam them, and at the same time saying we can't do nothing with them. And that's the frustrating part of Cardinals Twitter. The truth is, some of them cannot be untouchable because there's not enough positions, and they're all going to be due up around the same time, maybe a year or two apart. But you're talking about people you want to be cornerstones of your team. What's the difference of 1 or 2 years? If you want them to be good enough to stick around and be your superstar, so I think you're going to have to maybe explore an avenue out of a trade to lengthen your lineup. One kind of tidbit I would love is to take some of these prospects that we have and offer Oakland a package for Matt Olson and maybe a combo with either Sean Manaea or Chris. And I don't know exactly maybe what that haul would look at, but you would get your left-handed bat DH with a first baseman that can split first baseman duties with Paul Goldschmidt. One, the other can be DH, essentially have not an off day, but a little easier day as Goldschmidt ages. Matt Olson's 27 years old. He's still cost controllable at the moment, I believe. I like the idea of possibly maybe lengthening your lineup with a DH, and then keeping Paul DeYoung or a combination of DeYoung and Sosa doesn't seem so crazy, right? Because you're lengthening your lineup in through a different avenue, and all of a sudden DeYoung's 20 home runs with 1,000,000 strikeouts doesn't seem that bad. It's not as amplified.
Right. Go ahead, Larry. You got something for him?
Yeah, well, I mean, and that's the thing. You can always have that one guy hitting 200, but you can't have three of them. So you add by subtraction, I guess you could say. And that's because that's been my conversation for a long time. That we've got a lot of young talent in the minor leagues that right now there's not a lot of places looking for them to play. And if Arenado stays, we've got a plethora of third baseman prospects that a year of maturity makes a huge difference in their lives. And I think Oakland has been a good trade partner for us for a long time, and I think that is a good fit. Chris and I have talked about this at length. I think Oakland. I'm a huge Manaea fan. He played here at Terre Haute, where I live, for Indiana State University. So I've seen Sean play in person several times, and I was always intrigued. And I thought, this is the kid we need. This is a kid that's durable. He's done a good job at Oakland. And then the other thing we forget is, in the American League, it's a totally different type game, which now we're getting the DH, so they say. So he's used to those lineups with no easy spot off in the lineup. But I'm like you. I fear that people are wanting, Gorman's going to be the guy that's going to be the DH this year. He's going to play a little bit of second base. He's going to DH, or you're going to look at a guy, one of the outfielders, maybe Newsbar, one of those guys are going to come in. They're going to be the guy that's going to be the other DH or whatever. My question is with this lineup now, who's your backup infielder? Because Sosa doesn't really play a whole lot of third base. Rondon is gone. Carpenter's gone. So now you've got an infield with your best utility player is actually your starting second baseman. So they're going to have to bring in somebody that covers first and third and maybe play some short.
Yeah, and right now you really don't have a solid backup first baseman, and you have Luken Baker that's not quite ready, and then he's log jammed through Goldschmidt. You have Jordan Walker who's not quite ready, log jammed with Arenado, which is a little tidbit. I think the Cardinals are going to need to find out if he can play a different position other than third base. Maybe see if he can play first. His frame may be a little bit too stocky for short, but I kind of tend to disagree with that narrative. I think he could You got Corey Seager, who stands at 6'3", Jordan Walker 6'5". It's not a huge difference. I tend to think the more bigger, bulkier shortstops are the ones you want. They're the ones that tend to get the $300 million contracts. But you need to figure out if he can play a different position other than third. And you're right. There might be a kind of a need for someone who can play both corners, maybe fill in at shortstop. I think they were linked to Travis Shaw earlier in the offseason as a left-handed bat that can be a first base backup, fill in, maybe play DH. You have, I don't believe Travis Shaw can play third, but yeah, I think there's a need for the utility man. But I also just think that they need to figure out what they're going to do with the prospects. There needs to be a little bit of spring cleaning and kind of solidify what direction this organization is going to go as far as who their cornerstone pieces are going to be. You have like 3 or 4 in your top 30 in the outfield. Well, then you look at our outfield. Is our outfield set or is it not? If O'Neill repeats, he's not going anywhere. Carlson's not going anywhere. The most expendable outfielder we have is Harrison Bader. Do you foresee another outfielder in our top 30 that is going to surpass Harrison Bader? If you do, he's a valuable commodity. You have, and if you do believe Harrison Bader is your cornerstone, then you have 3 or 4 outfielders that you need to explore what their markets could be over the next year and a half. Same thing with catcher. I would argue that Yadier Molina is retiring 1 year too early. If he could, hypothetically, in a perfect world, if Yadier Molina could play 2 years, you have 1 more year of development for Herrera. There's a lot of people that have claimed that he's not ready necessarily on a talent level, but a maturity level. You could argue that playing up under Yadi could help his maturity level, but then you're sacrificing his developmental of not letting him play every day, which I think he still needs. Kisner could be a wonderful trade piece, but if you trade Kisner, then you have to go out and sign a backup anyways if Herrera's not ready. If Yadi could play 2 years, you could get through this year with Yadi and Kiz, and then next year you could easily trade Kiz without the worry of having a backup that's familiar with the staff. Herrera comes up, plays 1 more year under Yadi after another year of development in 2021, and then you work on the maturity, and you don't necessarily worry about throwing them to the Sharks right away. And then you also have a couple other catchers in your top 30. The names are right on the tip of my tongue. You have Rodriguez, I believe, Julio Rodriguez.
Yep.
And another one.
Alex Sanchez is there too.
Correct. And if you see Herrera as your cornerstone, well, then it's time to maybe see what you can find in the catcher market as these develop over the next few years. You have a bunch of awesome top 30 prospects, but they're all log jamming the same positions. And what you have to do is you have to start using them. You have to start trading them and quit overvaluing them. Our front office has, I believe, brainwashed the fans and just cherishing our young prospects, and that we can't use them as pieces to acquire major league talent, when in reality, there's no places for all these guys to go.
Yeah, one of our fellow group moderators, Brad Kell, he always says, prospects are nice, but parades are cooler. When we have like those log jams, and obviously we had an outfield log jam, to where we parted ways with Randy Rosarena and Adolis Garcia, and they go elsewhere. And I know Cardinal fans have yet to see what a Liberatore does as far as the return for the Cardinals. But when you see players go, and organizations don't always get it right, it takes something to get something. You're not going to give away your low-level prospects and get a guy that's going to be a stud for the next decade. It rarely works like that. So, with having log jams, sometimes it's a hit and miss on the ones that you keep and the ones that you give up. But having said that, we hung on to Bader O'Neill and caught a lot of flack from some fans that were like, one of the two, if not both, should have been shipped out. And here we go with both of them earning a Gold Glove. They seem to be coming into their own. And Carlson, really taking steps in his first season. It looks like that outfield core could be set for a while if they continue. So I agree with your assessment that log jamming these guys, especially when they come up at the same time. We're seeing that a little bit now with so many being arbitration eligible, that you got to take care of these guys now. And it seems like there's going to be a new group going to be coming up, before long, that the Cardinals will have to address that too.
Yeah, and continuity and kind of the word I'm looking for. So having a Yachty and Waino is the perfect example. They've been around. They're lifetime Cardinals. And when you look across the organization, you look at some of these prospects coming up, and you think to yourself, which one of these are going to be the next corner piece for the Cardinals? And you can Mason Wynn, Jordan Walker, Nolan Gorman, Matthew Liberatore. These are the names that first come to mind. And if you want to put those in a different basket and label them untouchable, fine. But then you have a plethora of top 30 prospects that are very valuable just based on the fact of the positions they play. Like, for example, Delvin Perez. Delvin Perez isn't going anywhere. He has Mason Wynn right in front of him. You could argue that Jordan Walker is right in front of him. Nolan Gorman is going to be in front of him on the second base platform. And this is all assuming Nolan Arenado is not going to opt out. Delvin Perez should be developed one more year. Hopefully his stock rises even more. And then you trade him. Unless, Jordan Walker takes a step back or you start getting worried on those avenues. But you're essentially, you got to start developing these players to trade them. You don't want to get into the situation where you're having another Kisner. Kisner should have been shipped long ago. And he should have been shipped when he was young, and we should have kept kind of going down the avenue that we did with who was the backup catcher's name that we had for a couple of years? Yes, Wieters. I think we should have kept going kind of down that system and trade Kisner fairly earlier, because I think if the front office didn't believe Yachty wasn't going anywhere, then they shouldn't be in the seats they're in. Because even the casual fan is going to tell you that Yachty is coming back, and when he's done, he'll tell you he's done. And if he's coming back, he's coming back to the Cardinals. That was a foregone conclusion. And they've wasted a lot of Kisner years, and his stock has dropped compared to what it could have been. You don't want to get into that situation with four other kind of position players where every year they age drops their value. They're no longer even considered prospects. And it's happened more than once with the Cardinals. And I don't want to keep seeing it. I would rather them take these trade pieces and get something that's going to help the team on the major league level. And it's aggravating when I even see fans tell me that so many of these prospects are untouchable, because that's a lot of what I got on the poll that I posted earlier. And it's like, who's not untouchable then? We don't have 15 positions out on the field.
The other side of that is that when the organization as a whole, they didn't win beyond the major leagues either. So it's not like these prospects have gelled at, say, AA or AAA, where they were better than other organizations anyway as individual pieces. Like you said, Mozeliak has done one thing. He's acquired the best athletes at certain positions. We know he likes the college pitching arms. Those are his favorites. We don't really dip into the high school market that often, but when they do, it's usually a solid kid like a Perez who fell just because the marijuana and all that stuff he fell out of the top 10. The maturity level just never hit with him. He's the one that really disappointed me. But even you got Alec Burleson, that's the kid that's really going to strike interest in the future. But, like you said, where's Lucan Baker? Where's that kid going to go? He's, we don't want him sitting like his does and sitting on the bench and hoping to get to play. So why not get value for him now rather than later? He's not worth anything.
Correct. I completely agree.
Go ahead.
And Lucan Baker was like the perfect example of that situation. That's all I'm gonna say.
Yeah, I know we were kind of frustrated, even though the age difference was a little bit. But John Nagowski, when he got the call up, he was killing it in spring training, and everybody's like, "Man, we got to find a spot for him." And even me, in the beginning of the year, I'm like, "Man, slide him in the outfield, see what he can do until his back cools off." And he never got like a fair gig. We release him, he goes over to Pittsburgh, gets phased out over there too. Where, again, you keep some of these guys and they're blocked, and then if you try to bring them up, if you're not really giving them a full go, you're kind of wasting their talents there also. So, staying on the offensive side of things before I'm sure Larry will kick it back over to the relief corps that might be available, but reunions are nice. And I know one name out there that I know Larry's giving me the big eye here, but, Albert Pujols, I know isn't somebody that's going to be the most sought after free agent, but the idea of a reunion and a farewell tour, knowing that his cost isn't going to be, a lot. And basically you bring a guy like that in to DH or be a bench bat. I'm not sure which he'd feel most comfortable being, but whatever the contract is, the Cardinals are going to make that back in ticket sales and merchandise with number 5 Cardinal jerseys back everywhere. So where would you land on thinking, obviously he's not going to be the Cardinals top free agent to go after, but as far as having a reunion tour and their interest level in a Pujols, what do you see happening from that?
Yeah. So the fan in me wants to 100% see it happen. That would be for me beautiful. Now, from organizational standpoint, you could argue that there's a need for it. If you're going to have a barring that there's no other big bats brought in, he would be serviceable for a DH against left-handed starters and a good bench bat, and then there's your backup, at least first baseman, to give Goldie some resting time or barring an injury. And then you could look for a utility bat that could serve as shortstop and third. I believe that the doors are open. I asked early on during the off season about Pujols because I always do. I was very glued into it, and I actually put it out when the Angels released them that the Cardinals have molded over, and that later came out to be true. And I think most people with a brain would assume that the Cardinals would mull it over because it's Pujols. I think if the roster got structured to where the Cardinals felt like they filled most of their holes that they felt that were important, and there was an opportunity to have a bench bat on the right-handed side that could possibly fill in DH, I think it would happen, and I don't think it would require too much negotiation. I think it would just take a phone call. It just depends on who else calls them. When I asked about Pujols and if there was any kind of demand for him around the league, because I essentially got the vibe that it was something that could be put on the back burner. It wasn't a pressing or urgent need to get out there and wrap him up if there was interest. The Miami Marlins was brought up as one team that they felt like could snatch Pujols up before the team was really ready to explore that avenue. But if that didn't happen and he was out there, if you get to the point where the lockout's over and the season's getting ready to start, I would say there's a 75% chance that he'd probably come back to the Cardinals. But that's also a little fan in me too, pumping up those numbers.
Yeah, that's the way I see it too. I know Larry gets on me all the time about being, nostalgic with, Wainwright and Yachty, but yeah, Pujols, I know when he left, it hurt a lot of us, but obviously he was in a decline, in his years, for the Angels, but it would have been nice to see some of those milestones done in the Cardinal uniform, and just to have him back, even if it's in a limited role or a DH role, to see the farewell that basically he got from being an opposing player coming to Busch Stadium. I can't imagine the electricity that the fans would have seeing him back with birds on a bat. Larry, I'll let you kind of ride off with that.
Well, at one point, you have to remember Albert Pujols was the worst player in baseball, period. And he can't hit right-hand pitching. So he's very one-dimensional. And on top of that, the injuries, the age, and like I said, the sentimental value, I get it 100%. I don't hold anything against the man for leaving, taking cash to go someplace else to play baseball. I'm sorry, you give me 200 plus million, I'll play in Japan or I'll play on the moon. I don't care. But if he signs, I would like a 1-day contract and say, thank you, retire. Thank you. Have a nice life. But other than that, so what do you think live that as far as the relief pitching ranks, do you see speaking of reunions, a Joe Kelly return, or do you see us going out there and looking for a specialist like a closer with everything going on with the closing duties last year and the failures we had there?
So I think the late inning bullpen guys is maybe where the Cardinals feel the most comfortable with. I know that may sound surprising, but you have Cabrera, Gallegos. I think there's a lot of faith in Reyes. Even though we had a few kind of collapses there at the end, we also saw a spectacular first half. That you could argue he got lucky quite a few times, but he got out of the jams. I don't see Reyes being the closer to start the season. I think that's going to be Gallegos. But I think he's still going to be thrown in high leverage situations. You're going to have Hicksy coming back. I think Cody Whitley took a few steps forward. I think there's still a belief that Ryan Helsley is going to be able to contribute to this pen. I think the bullpen is probably the most when you look at compared to the shortstop or the bench. I think the bullpens is one of the key pieces that the Cardinals believe that they've almost had solidified. I think there's a possible need for maybe a seventh, sixth, seventh inning guy. I do love the idea of Joe Kelly having a little reunion. I know the front office has considered Joe Kelly to be a target. I think that that's maybe the type of piece that you would be looking for. Someone who can come in, throw strikes, high leverage situations, but also a veteran presence. You have a young bullpen. And some of your older guys are gone. You lost a little bit of a veteran presence with Miller. And then you have a few of these guys like Hicks, who's coming back after injury, who hasn't pitched in over a year and a half. Well, no, he pitched and then he got hurt again.
Yeah.
But still, you're talking about someone who hadn't seen work. And I think you need a veteran voice out there, if anything. Someone that maybe you can rely on when things get a little sticky. If you go through kind of the spells that we went through last year, you need a rock. And I think that's going to be a veteran relief pitcher. And I kind of prefer that we didn't re-sign Luis Garcia because he has some question marks that comes with him. He's only really had one good year, and that was with us. I kind of want a reliever with a track record.
Yeah, I mean, I think our biggest losses with Miller leaving is the left-hand presence. Like you said, I think a veteran left-hander would be the perfect scenario. But I like Joe Kelly. He's I liked him. I hate to see him go, but I mean, I understood the trade at the time. Again, it's back to having too many prospects and no place for him to play.
There's not a left-handed relief pitcher on the market that screams to me.
Right. I agree.
Now you could look into trade avenues, and really trades weren't the focus early on in the offseason because of the lockout. And we talked about like it was kind of said earlier, relievers can almost be a dime in a dozen, and I'm not a huge fan of giving multi-year contracts to relievers. I know I like the 1 or 2 year deals if you're going to do it, but you have a lot of young guys up there biting at the bit that can come up and fill in a bullpen more, and I would trust more over a young guy coming up and being in the starting rotation. But yeah, Joe Kelly, love it. Not a left-handed reliever that I love, but I look forward to kind of seeing the direction they're going to go. Because there's quite a few holes that I think that need to be filled.
Well, I agree with that. We'll kind of get ready to wrap this up. We're about to hit the hour mark, but just overall in general, obviously we don't know how long this lockout's going to last. We also don't know if some of the talks with a story or others that they might have already engaged with, if that picks up steam coming out of the lockout. But I don't know if using your source for this, or just kind of a gut feeling? When the front office tells you kind of bullpen might be the route that they go, do you see that being the more pressing need that they do address coming out of lockout? Or do you think that, getting that bench bat, that Mozeliak kind of wants to maybe get a different kind of bat, as he mentioned during the Mats press conference? What direction do you think they'll go? Obviously, the team will pivot. If a negotiation goes stale or they don't feel like they're making any progress, they'll go a different route. Where do you see, as soon as the lockout ends, where do you see the hot stove really pushing in the Cardinals' direction?
Yeah, I'll answer that, but before I forget, that little tidbit of looking for a different kind of bat. I don't know if you guys checked that whole press conference, but I found it very intriguing the way he vocalized and the way his face looked when he said a different type of bat. I heard the word pull hose when he said different type of bat. It's almost like his sadistic sense of humor that he knew he was talking about Pujols. We knew he was talking about Pujols, but that could also be delusion on my part. But yes, I think the relief and the bench, I think it's almost viewed equally, because they're going to take care of both. If they don't explore the story market any further post lockout and talk cease, and they see that's not going in any direction that's going to be suitable or beneficial for the club, I think both of them are going to be addressed. There's going to be a relief pitcher, and there's going to be a bat or two added. And I think there's going to be if for some reason it comes breaking news and we sign Trevor Story, there's still going to be a bullpen piece added, and there's still maybe a utility man added, depending on what that payroll is going to be for Story. But if Story doesn't happen and we go into the season with DeYoung and Sosa, you have still a decent chunk of payroll that you can direct towards a bullpen piece or a bat piece, and you can go substantially higher up on a tier level of the type of player you could be looking at. But I do think both would be addressed, and I think the matter is equally pressing.
Yeah, I know Story is the more sexy name out there that Cardinal fans, are clamoring for. And, regardless, if there's going to be part of the fan base upset if we get Story, that, they'll think of 1,000 reasons why we shouldn't have got him, whether it's a split at cores or whatever we end up paying the guy. And vice versa. If we don't go after him, we bring in Pujols, you're going to have the nostalgia people like me that are all yay about it. And then you're going to have some be like, this is a typical Mo move. There's no appeasing all the fans, and that's the beauty of it. We all fan different. We say that constantly, that, no matter your level of, there's some that are diehard fans that are very knowledgeable and others that are just casual fans. At the end of the day, we all tune in and watch our Cardinals and root them on. So there's going to be naysayers out there that hate whatever move, and John Mozeliak's going to be the devil in the eyes of, many. So, Larry, you got anything you kind of want to end with? Or?
Well, I mean, like I said, I think the biggest thing is even the lockout, the discussions with adding the DH, going to the 28-man roster. So that also frees up, you're going to end up adding another player anyway. So I agree. I mean, I appreciate you coming on live. I mean, this has been very educational. And like I said, I'm not a Twitter guy, so I don't follow you. So I'm sorry to say that out loud, but I'm not a Twitter guy. I don't get on Facebook a whole lot that much anymore either. So, but I do appreciate you coming on and sharing your insights with us, and, letting us know what you think as well as your opinions as ours. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. I want to thank you guys for having me. It was fun. I hope that, unfortunately, I wish we could have done this when there wasn't a lockout, and maybe I had a little bit more fun scoops that I could have saved for the show. But hopefully, maybe when the gates open, we can maybe do it again, and maybe we can have a more fun discussion. But I think either way, we're going to see the Cardinals make a few more moves, and it should be fun.
Yeah, definitely come back.
Yeah, for sure. And, I'll second what Larry said. We appreciate you coming on with us. And again, I'll let you kind of tell people where they can find you. If you're primarily on Twitter, that's where I know you from. But, I'll kind of let you, give the fans here kind of a place to find your scoops out.
Yeah, so if you want to shoot me over a follow on Twitter, it's primarily my socials. It's going to be at Cardinals_live. I'm in the process of figuring out how I can use my platform on TikTok. I haven't found a way to utilize that yet. I'm not a big Facebook person, nor am I a big Instagram person or Snapchat. Really, Twitter and Reddit is my main socials. Um, we are going to do a few spaces later on in the week. So I appreciate anyone who can join that. And what we do is if I have any updates, I share them. And then I kind of open the floor and I allow people just to talk baseball like we have here done here tonight. And I appreciate you having me on, and I look forward to the next time.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Well, we'll end the show by thanking Live for joining us. I'll also say that anybody that does check us out on our Facebook group or Facebook page, we've also got this pinned on our Twitter account that we're doing a giveaway for the subscribers to this YouTube channel. Jared and Larry and myself, we've really appreciated everybody that's tuned in and supported us during this first season. So we've pinned this post where we've got 3 great giveaway prizes that in order to enter, all you have to do is screenshot your subscription to the channel and leave a comment or a reply on one of those platforms showing us the proof of subscription. We're going to enter everybody's name into a hat, draw 3 names. I believe the deadline will be January 2nd. The giveaway prizes is an Adam Wainwright bobblehead, Cardinals Nation 24/7 podcast t-shirt, and also 2 tickets to the New York Mets St. Louis Cardinals game, and I believe that's April 25th. That'll be the grand prize. So we're going to be doing that drawing, as the new year, hits. We're going to be doing that. But so far, a lot of entrants. It's kind of our way of giving back. We're definitely not professionals. We have fun with this. It's just kind of a fan forum, and we've had quite the first season of doing the podcast, and just getting the ball rolling for our website, where Brad Kell and myself have put out some blogs here recently and looking to maybe add some more contributors going forward to the Cardinals Nation 24/7 team. So be on the lookout for all that. As always, if you haven't subscribed already, hit the subscribe button, the notification bell. You'll get notified each time that a new episode drops. And hopefully Cardinals Live will share this out when we get it up and loaded tomorrow. And some of his team live might jump ship and come support us as well. So we appreciate having you on live, and we'll definitely have you back on.
All righty. And you guys, happy holidays. And again, thanks for having me on. It was fun.
Likewise. Go Cards.
Cardinals.